Native baby is dying and nothing can save him. Not chance, not ancient remedies, not even the wisdom of his tribe's elder. Then, a captured white medicine woman is brought into the heart of Kiowa land, and what happens next will change more than just the baby's fate. Thank you so much for watching, and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. The Oklahoma Territory stretched endlessly beneath a sky that burned with the colors of approaching dusk. The year was 1875, and the land belonged to the Kiowa people, though the encroaching white settlers seemed determined to forget that truth. Among the scattered encampments along the Washita River, one teepee stood apart from the others, its entrance facing east as tradition demanded, but its interior filled with a silence that felt heavier than the summer air outside. Inside, Chief Tatanka knelt beside a small bundle wrapped in soft deerskin. His son, barely 3 weeks old, struggled with each breath, tiny chest rising and falling in irregular patterns that made the chief's heart clench with fear. The baby's mother had died bringing him into this world, and now it seemed the child might follow her into the spirit realm. Tatanka was a man who had faced enemy warriors without flinching, who had led his people through winters so harsh that even the wolves had retreated to their dens. But watching his son fight for each breath unmade him in ways that no battle ever could. "He grows weaker," said Mapia, the tribe's medicine man, his weathered face grave as he observed the infant. The old healer had tried every remedy he knew: sage smoke, healing chants, poultices made from plants gathered under the full moon, but nothing had eased the baby's labored breathing. "The spirits are calling him home to his mother." Tatanka's jaw tightened. He was a striking man, tall and powerfully built, with strong features that spoke of generations of warriors. His long black hair fell past his shoulders, and his dark eyes held depths of both grief and determination. At 28, he had already earned his position as chief through courage and wisdom beyond his years, but all that meant nothing if he couldn't save his own son. "No," he said firmly, his voice rough with emotion. "There must be something more we can do." Mapia shook his head slowly. "I have exhausted my knowledge, my chief. Perhaps the white man's medicine? The white men who kill our buffalo and drive us from our lands?" Tatanka's voice rose with anger born of desperation. "You would have me trust them with my son's life?" "Not trust," Mapia replied carefully, "but use. 3 days' ride north near Fort Sill there is a settlement. I have heard whispers of a white woman there, one who heals the sick. They say she has knowledge of medicines that work differently from ours." Tatanka looked down at his son, watching the irregular rise and fall of that tiny chest. Pride warred with love in his heart, and love won. "I will bring her here," he declared. "If she can save my son, nothing else matters." "The white soldiers will not let her go willingly," Mapia warned, "and taking her by force could bring war to our people." The chief's expression hardened. "Then I will take her by stealth. Gather 10 of our best warriors. We ride when darkness falls." 3 days later, Dr. Sarah Mitchell was working late in her small clinic on the outskirts of the Fort Sill settlement. At 26, she had already defied every expectation her Boston family had held for her. Instead of marrying well and hosting tea parties, she had pursued medicine, studying under her physician father until his death, then continuing her education through correspondence and practical experience. When the opportunity had come to serve as a medical practitioner in the frontier territories, she had seized it despite the scandal it caused. Sarah was a beautiful woman, though she rarely paid attention to such things. Her honey-colored hair was usually pinned up in a practical bun, though rebellious curls always managed to escape around her face. Her green eyes were intelligent and compassionate, and her features were delicate but determined. She had learned to move with quiet confidence through a world that didn't quite know what to make of a woman, who could set bones, stitch wounds, and compound medicines with the same skill as any trained physician. Tonight, she was preparing tinctures by lamplight, carefully measuring drops of various extracts into small bottles. The settlement was quiet, most people already in their beds. She didn't hear the soft footsteps outside, didn't sense the shadows that moved with practiced stealth around her building. The door burst open suddenly, and Sarah spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. 6 Kiowa warriors filled her small clinic, their presence both terrifying and magnificent. They wore traditional dress, buckskin leggings, breechcloths, and nothing else, their muscular bodies painted with symbols she didn't understand. But it was the man who entered last who commanded her attention completely. Tatanka had to duck slightly to enter through the doorway. He was perhaps 6 feet tall, his broad shoulders and muscular frame speaking of a life spent riding, hunting, and fighting. His face was breathtakingly handsome in a way that transcended culture. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, proud nose, and those intense dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her. He wore his authority like other men wore clothes, an invisible mantle that marked him as a leader. "You are the healing woman," he said in surprisingly clear English, though his accent was thick. It wasn't a question. Sarah's mind raced. She could scream, but that would likely get someone killed. Possibly her. She could try to run, but 6 warriors stood between her and the door. So instead, she lifted her chin and met the chief's gaze directly. "I am Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and you are trespassing in my clinic." Something flickered in Tatanka's eyes, surprise perhaps, or respect. "My son is dying. You will come with me and save him." "I don't respond well to commands," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Especially from men who break into my clinic in the middle of the night. If you want my help, try asking like a civilized person." One of the warriors growled something in Kiowa, taking a step forward, but Tatanka raised a hand, and the man stopped immediately. The chief studied Sarah for a long moment, and she found herself unable to look away from those penetrating eyes. She saw grief there, beneath the pride and authority. Deep, raw grief mixed with desperate hope. "My son cannot breathe properly," Tatanka said, and this time his voice was softer, almost vulnerable. "He is 3 weeks old. His mother died birthing him, and now he struggles for each breath. Our medicine man has tried everything, but the baby grows weaker. If you do not help him, he will die." He paused, and when he spoke again, his words came slowly, as if each one cost him something. "Please, I am begging you to save my child." Sarah's heart twisted. She thought of all the reasons she should refuse, the danger, the scandal, the fact that helping him could be seen as aiding the enemy by the soldiers at Fort Sill. But then she thought of a baby struggling to breathe, and the decision was already made. She had sworn an oath to heal those in need, and that oath didn't distinguish between white and Kiowa. "I'll need to bring my medical bag," she said quietly, "and supplies. If your son has respiratory distress, I'll need specific medicines." Tatanka's expression shifted, relief washing over his features so clearly that Sarah realized he had expected her to refuse. "Take what you need. We must hurry." Sarah moved quickly, gathering her leather medical bag and filling it with supplies. Her stethoscope, various tinctures and powders, clean bandages, instruments. She added bottles of eucalyptus oil, peppermint extract, and a precious vial of digitalis. As she worked, she was acutely aware of Tatanka watching her every movement. "How long is the journey?" she asked, buckling her bag closed. 3 days on horseback." Sarah's eyes widened. 3 days. "Your son might not have 3 days if his condition is as serious as you describe. Then we ride fast and stop little," Tatanka replied grimly. He gestured to one of his warriors, who brought forward a buckskin bundle. "You cannot ride in that dress. Put these on." Sarah looked at the buckskin clothing, a simple tunic and leggings, similar to what Kiowa women wore. Heat rose to her cheeks. "I'll need privacy. We wait outside. But be quick. Every moment matters." Tatanka herded his men out, pulling the door closed behind them. Alone again, Sarah's hands trembled as she changed clothes. What was she doing? She was willingly going into Kiowa territory, away from all protection, to treat the son of a chief who had essentially kidnapped her. It was madness. But as she secured the buckskin leggings and pulled the soft tunic over her head, she thought again of that baby struggling to breathe, and she knew she couldn't have made any other choice. When she emerged, Tatanka's eyes swept over her quickly, then away, but not before she caught a flash of something in his expression. Approval. Attraction. She couldn't tell, and she told herself it didn't matter. "Can you ride?" he asked. Yes. She had learned during her time in the territory, though she was far from expert. He led her to where horses waited in the shadows. These weren't the cavalry horses Sarah was used to seeing. These were smaller, hardier ponies, their eyes bright with intelligence. Tatanka helped her mount with surprising gentleness, his strong hands steadying her, and she tried to ignore the jolt of awareness that ran through her at his touch. Then he swung onto his own horse with fluid grace, and they were moving, leaving the settlement behind as they rode into the darkness. Sarah looked back once, seeing the lights of civilization fade into the distance, and wondered if she would ever see them again. They rode hard through the night, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. Tatanka stayed close to Sarah, occasionally asking if she needed to rest, his concern evident despite the urgency that drove them forward. As dawn broke across the Oklahoma plains, painting the grasslands in shades of gold and amber, Sarah found herself seeing a beauty in this wild land that she had never fully appreciated before. They reached the Kiowa encampment as the sun climbed toward its peak on the third day. Sarah was exhausted, her body aching from the relentless pace, but she pushed aside her discomfort the moment she saw the teepee that Tatanka led her toward. Inside, the air was thick with sage smoke, and an elderly man sat beside a small bundle, chanting softly. Sarah's medical training took over immediately. She knelt beside the baby, her fingers already reaching for her stethoscope as she gently unwrapped the deerskin covering. The infant was tiny, his skin bearing the warm bronze tone of his father's people, and his little face was scrunched in distress as he struggled to breathe. Each inhalation came with a rattling sound that made Sarah's heart clench. "How long has he been breathing like this?" she asked, pressing the stethoscope to the baby's chest. "Since birth," Tatanka replied, hovering close, his massive frame tense with worry. "It has grown worse these past days." Sarah listened carefully, moving the stethoscope to different positions on the tiny chest. The baby's lungs were congested, fluid accumulating where there should be only air. It wasn't uncommon in newborns, but this case was severe, likely complicated by whatever trauma had occurred during the difficult birth that had taken his mother's life. "His lungs are filled with fluid," Sarah explained, looking up at Tatanka. "The medical term is respiratory distress. In newborns, it sometimes happens when there are complications during birth. The fluid prevents his lungs from expanding properly, which is why each breath is so difficult. Can you heal him?" The vulnerability in Tatanka's voice struck her deeply. This powerful chief who commanded warriors and led his people was utterly helpless before his son's illness. "I can try," Sarah said honestly, "but I need to work without interruption, and I need your trust. Some of what I do may look strange to you, but you must let me proceed." Tatanka nodded, then spoke rapidly in Kiowa to the elderly medicine man. Mapia studied Sarah for a long moment, his ancient eyes seeming to peer into her soul. Then he nodded slowly and moved back, giving her space. Sarah worked quickly, her hands steady despite her exhaustion. First, she prepared a steam treatment, boiling water and adding eucalyptus oil, then positioning the baby so he could breathe in the medicated vapors. The infant coughed weakly, but gradually his breathing eased slightly. Next, she used gentle percussion therapy, carefully tapping on his back and chest to help loosen the fluid in his lungs. "What are you doing?" Tatanka asked, watching her hands move across his son's tiny body. "Helping the fluid break up and drain," Sarah explained softly. "Sometimes babies need assistance clearing their airways. In hospitals back east, we have machines that can help, but here, we must do it by hand." She worked for hours, alternating between steam treatments, percussion therapy, and administering small doses of medicine to help reduce inflammation and ease breathing. She showed Tatanka how to hold his son upright, explaining that gravity would help drain the fluid. Throughout it all, she was aware of his presence, his intense focus on every move she made, his desperate hope that she could save his child. As evening approached, the baby's breathing had improved noticeably. The rattling sound had diminished, and his chest rose and fell more regularly. Sarah prepared a tincture that would need to be administered every few hours throughout the night. "He's not out of danger yet," she warned, looking up at Tatanka. "The next few days are critical. He needs constant care, the steam treatments every 4 hours, the medicine every 3, and someone needs to keep him upright as much as possible. If the fluid returns, it could be worse than before." "Then you will stay," Tatanka said, It wasn't a question, but there was a note of request in his voice that hadn't been there before. "Please, stay until my son is well." Sarah met his gaze, seeing the naked emotion there. In 3 days of hard riding, she had seen this man's strength, his leadership, his fierce love for his child. She had also seen glimpses of something else, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the gentle care he had taken to ensure she had water and food during their brief stops, the respect in his voice when he spoke to her now. "I'll stay," she agreed quietly. "But you should know that my disappearance will have been noticed. The soldiers at Fort Sill will be looking for me." "Let them look," Tatanka replied, though concern flickered across his face. "My people will keep watch. We will see them long before they see us." A woman appeared at the teepee entrance, middle-aged and kind-faced. Tatanka spoke to her in Kiowa, and she nodded, gesturing for Sarah to follow. "Winona will show you where you can rest," he explained. "You have traveled far and worked hard. My son sleeps more peacefully than he has since birth. You need rest too." Sarah wanted to protest that she should stay near the baby, but exhaustion was pulling at her like an undertow. "Wake me in 3 hours for his next treatment," she instructed, then followed Winona from the teepee. The woman led her to a smaller teepee nearby, pointing to a bed of furs and blankets laid out inside. Despite Sarah's fears about being among the Kiowa, Winona's gentle manner and the comfortable sleeping space suggested she was a guest, not a prisoner. As she lay down, Sarah's last thought was of Tatanka's face when he looked at his son, and the way her heart had responded to the depth of emotion she saw there. She woke to someone gently shaking her shoulder. Opening her eyes, she found Tatanka crouched beside her, his face illuminated by the dim light of early morning. "It is time for his treatment," he said softly. "And thank you. For sleeping, I mean. You needed rest." Sarah sat up quickly, pushing her loose hair back from her face. She hadn't realized Tatanka had let her sleep longer than 3 hours. It was nearly dawn now. "I told you to wake me. What if he—" "I gave him the medicine," Tatanka interrupted, and there was almost a smile on his lips. "You showed me how much, and I remembered. He is breathing well, but I thought you should see for yourself." In his teepee, Sarah examined the baby again, relief washing through her as she confirmed that his condition had indeed improved overnight. The fluid was draining, his breathing more stable. As she worked, she became aware of Tatanka watching her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "You are not what I expected," he said suddenly. Sarah glanced at him. "What did you expect?" "Someone afraid. Someone who would see only a savage when she looked at me." He paused. "Someone who would not care whether my son lived or died, because his blood is Kiowa." "I see a baby who needs help," Sarah replied, tucking the infant back into his wrappings, "and a father who loves his son. The color of your skin or mine doesn't change either of those things." Something shifted in Tatanka's expression, a warmth entering his eyes that made Sarah's breath catch. "You are unusual among your people." "So I've been told." She managed a small smile. "Usually not as a compliment. It is a compliment from me." He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. "Sarah, may I call you Sarah?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "I am sorry for taking you from your home. I was desperate, but I am not sorry that it brought you here to save my son." He hesitated, then added quietly, "And I am not sorry to have met you." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous territory, more dangerous than being in a Kiowa camp far from any white settlement. What she was feeling for this man, this chief who had burst into her life with such force, was impossible. They came from different worlds, worlds that were at war with each other. "Your son is improving," she said, trying to steer back to safer ground. "But he'll need continued care for at least another week. After that—" She trailed off, not sure what happened after that. "After that, I will take you home," Tatanka said, "if that is what you wish." The way he said it, with a note of hope that she might not wish it, made Sarah's pulse race. She stood quickly, needing space. "I should prepare more medicine." Over the following days, Sarah fell into a rhythm within the Kiowa camp. She tended to the baby regularly, pleased to see him growing stronger with each passing day. His breathing normalized, the fluid completely draining from his lungs, and he began nursing with vigor. Tatanka named him Kohana, which Winona explained meant swift one, expressing his father's hope that the boy would grow to be fast and strong. But Sarah also began treating other members of the tribe. An elderly woman with painful joints found relief in a poultice Sarah created. A young warrior with an infected wound was saved from what could have become blood poisoning through careful cleaning and proper bandaging. The Kiowa people began to see Sarah not as a captive, but as a healer who had come to help them. Children followed her curiously. Women smiled and offered her food, and men nodded respectfully when she passed. But it was Tatanka's attention that consumed her thoughts more than she wanted to admit. He came to check on Kohana multiple times each day, but Sarah suspected the baby wasn't his only reason for visiting. They talked about medicine and healing practices, about their different worlds, about loss and hope. Tatanka told her about his wife, a gentlewoman named Kimimela, who had died bringing their son into the world, and Sarah heard the grief that still weighed on him. She told him about her father, who had taught her medicine despite society's disapproval, and how his death had left her alone in a world that didn't quite accept a woman doctor. "You are not alone now," Tatanka said one evening as they sat outside his teepee, watching the sun set over the plains. Kohana slept peacefully in his cradleboard nearby, his breathing steady and strong. "You have brought life to my son, and in doing so you have brought hope back to me. My people see you as a gift." "And what do you see me as?" Sarah asked softly, already knowing the answer in her heart but needing to hear him say it. Tatanka turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense in the fading light. "I see you as the woman who saved my son's life. I see you as brave and skilled and compassionate." He paused, reaching out to gently touch her face, his calloused fingers surprisingly tender against her skin. "And I see you as someone I could love, if you would let me." Sarah's breath caught. Everything about this was impossible. She was white, he was Kiowa. She came from a world of cities and civilization. He lived in these wild plains following the old ways. Her people and his were enemies in a conflict that showed no signs of ending. And yet, when she looked into his eyes, none of those impossibilities seemed to matter as much as the feeling that bloomed in her chest. "This is madness," she whispered, but she didn't pull away from his touch. "Perhaps," Tatanka agreed. "But I have learned that the heart does not always follow the path of wisdom. Mine has chosen you, Sarah Mitchell, no matter how mad that choice may be." Before she could respond, shouting erupted from the edge of the camp. Warriors ran toward the commotion, and Tatanka was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. Sarah grabbed Kohana's cradleboard protectively as a young warrior ran up, speaking rapidly in Kiowa. "Soldiers," Tatanka translated grimly. "A cavalry unit flying a white flag. They say they have come to negotiate for your return." Sarah's stomach dropped. She had known this moment would come eventually, but now that it had arrived, she realized with startling clarity that she didn't want to go. These past days among the Kiowa had shown her a way of life that, while different from her own, was rich with meaning and community. And Tatanka, the thought of leaving him felt like tearing out a piece of her own heart. "You must go to them," Tatanka said, his voice carefully controlled. "If you do not, they will attack. They will say we hold you captive, that we have harmed you. Blood will be spilled. But I don't want—" Sarah started, then stopped, seeing the pain in his eyes that mirrored her own. "Come," he said quietly. "We will go together." Tatanka gathered several of his senior warriors, including Mahpia, and they rode out to meet the cavalry unit with Sarah. She carried Kohana, the baby now healthy and alert, as evidence of what she had accomplished here. When they reached the soldiers, Sarah recognized Captain Morrison, the commanding officer at Fort Sill. "Dr. Mitchell," Morrison said, his relief evident. "Thank God you're alive. We feared the worst when you disappeared." "I'm fine, Captain," Sarah replied, aware of Tatanka's presence beside her, solid and strong. "Chief Tatanka brought me here to treat his infant son, who was seriously ill. I came willingly to save the baby's life." Morrison's eyes narrowed skeptically. "Willingly, in the middle of the night, without word to anyone?" "The situation was urgent," Sarah said firmly. "The baby would have died without immediate intervention. I took an oath to heal those in need regardless of who they are." Nevertheless, you're a white woman alone among hostiles, Morrison argued. It's my duty to bring you back to safety. These people are not hostiles, Captain. They are simply trying to live their lives and care for their families just as we do. Sarah looked at the baby in her arms, then at Tatanka. I have been treated with nothing but respect here. Chief Tatanka has promised to return me safely when I was ready to go. And are you ready? Morrison asked pointedly. Sarah's heart pounded. This was the moment of choice. She could say yes, return to Fort Sill, resume her practice in the settlement, and pretend these days had never happened. Or she could choose something else entirely, something that would scandalize white society, but would fulfill something deep within her soul. She looked at Tatanka, seeing the carefully masked emotion in his eyes. He would let her go if she chose to leave. She knew that. He was too honorable to hold her against her will, but she also saw the hope there, the silent plea that she would stay. Captain Morrison, Sarah said slowly, choosing her words carefully, I appreciate your concern for my welfare, but I have been thinking about my future, and I have decided that my skills as a healer are needed here, among the Kiowa people. They have no doctor, no one trained in modern medicine. I can make a real difference here. That's absurd, Morrison sputtered. You can't seriously be considering staying with the Indians. I am not just considering it, Captain. I am deciding it. Sarah's voice grew stronger. I am a free woman, capable of making my own choices. I choose to remain here to continue my work as a healer among people who need my skills. Morrison's face reddened. This is preposterous. You've clearly been influenced. I have been influenced by nothing except my own conscience and my own heart, Sarah interrupted firmly. I am staying of my own free will. If you attempt to take me by force, you will be violating my rights as a citizen, and I will file formal complaints with the territorial government. Beside her, Sarah felt Tatanka's surprise and joy radiating like heat from a fire. He didn't speak, but his hand found hers, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that spoke volumes. Morrison stared at them, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally resignation. This will cause a scandal, Dr. Mitchell. Your reputation will be destroyed. My reputation among people who never accepted me anyway? Sarah smiled sadly. I can live with that, Captain. What I cannot live with is turning my back on people who need me or on, she glanced at Tatanka, on something real and true just because it defies convention. The captain shook his head slowly. Very well, but this decision is on your head. If you change your mind, you know where to find us. He pulled on his horse's reins, preparing to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Dr. Mitchell, I hope you know what you're doing. So do I, Captain, Sarah replied honestly. So do I. As the cavalry rode away, Tatanka pulled Sarah into his arms, holding her and his son together. You would truly stay? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. You would give up your world for mine? I'm not giving up my world, Sarah said, looking up at him. I'm choosing a new one, a better one where I can be a healer without apology, where I can make a real difference and where, she touched his face gently, where I can love a man who sees me for who I truly am. Tatanka kissed her then, a kiss that spoke of promise and passion and a future they would build together. When they finally pulled apart, Mapia was smiling broadly, and the warriors who had accompanied them were grinning and speaking animatedly in Kiowa. They say you are a warrior in your own way, Tatanka translated. You fight with medicine instead of weapons, and you are brave enough to follow your heart despite the costs. They approve. He paused, his expression growing serious. But Sarah, you must understand what this means. If you stay, if you choose to be with me, there will be challenges. My people will eventually accept you. Many already have. But there will be those among both our peoples who see our union as wrong. I know, Sarah said, but I learned from my father that doing what's right is often more important than doing what's easy. And this, being here, helping your people, being with you, this feels right in a way nothing else ever has. Over the following weeks, Sarah fully integrated into the Kiowa camp. She set up a proper clinic in her own teepee, where people came for treatment. She learned some Kiowa language, and Tatanka improved his English. They spent hours talking about how to bridge their two worlds, discussing which traditions from each culture could coexist harmoniously. Kohana thrived, growing stronger and more alert each day. Sarah took special joy in watching Tatanka with his son, seeing the fierce love in every gentle touch, every soft word. The baby became a symbol of what their union could represent. New life born from near tragedy, hope emerging from despair, and the possibility that two different worlds could come together in love rather than conflict. One evening, as autumn began to paint the plains in golds and russets, Tatanka took Sarah to a high bluff overlooking the river. The sunset was spectacular, the sky ablaze with colors that seemed impossible. "Among my people," Tatanka said, "when a man wishes to take a wife, he brings gifts to her family and proves he can provide for her. But you have no family here for me to honor in the traditional way." "I have you," Sarah said softly, "and Kohana, and Winona, and Mapia, and all the others who have welcomed me. That's family enough." Tatanka reached into a pouch at his belt and withdrew something that caught the dying light, a necklace made of small shells and polished stones, intricately woven together. "I made this for you," he said. "Each stone represents something. The white ones for your healing skill, the blue for your courage, the red for the passion in your heart. Will you wear it? Will you be my wife, Sarah Mitchell, and help me raise my son and any other children we might be blessed with?" Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, yes, I will." He placed the necklace around her neck, his fingers lingering on her skin, then kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart soar. When they returned to camp, Tatanka announced their intention to marry, and the celebration that followed was joyous and welcoming. Even those who had been skeptical of Sarah's presence seemed to warm to the idea of their chief finding happiness again. They were married in a ceremony that blended both Kiowa traditions and some elements familiar to Sarah from her Christian upbringing. Mapia performed the ritual, calling upon the spirits to bless their union, while Sarah recited vows she had written herself, promising to honor Tatanka, to care for his people, and to raise Kohana as her own son. As winter approached, Sarah found a deep contentment she had never known in her previous life. She continued her medical practice, treating everything from common ailments to serious injuries, and her reputation as a healer spread to other tribes in the region. Some even traveled days to seek her help. Tatanka supported her work completely, proud of his wife's skills and grateful for the lives she saved. Kohana called her mother in his first words, and Sarah's heart overflowed with love for the child she had saved, and who had in turn saved her by bringing her to this life. She and Tatanka talked often about the future, about the challenges their people would face as white settlement continued to expand. But they faced those challenges together, determined to find ways to bridge the divide between their worlds. On a cold December evening, as snow began to fall softly over the plains, Sarah sat in their warm teepee with Tatanka and Kohana. The baby, now healthy and thriving at 6 months old, played contentedly with a carved wooden toy his father had made. Tatanka's arm was around Sarah, holding her close, and she felt the new life growing within her. Their child, a bridge between two worlds, a symbol of hope and love. "Are you happy?" Tatanka asked softly, his breath warm against her hair. Sarah looked at their son, at the home they had built together, at the life she had chosen despite all the obstacles. She thought about the clinic full of people who trusted her, the tribe who had accepted her, and most of all, the man whose love had given her a purpose and belonging she had never found in her old world. "I am more than happy," she replied, turning to kiss him gently. "I am exactly where I belong. With you, with Kohana, with our people. This is home." And as the snow continued to fall outside, covering the Oklahoma plains in a blanket of white, Sarah knew that sometimes the most impossible choices lead to the most beautiful destinations. She had followed her heart into unknown territory, and in doing so had found not just a patient to heal, but a family to love, a community to serve, and a man whose broken heart had mended alongside his son's labored breathing, all because she had been brave enough to take the risk.